Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Vital MX. I'm Willie Simons. We just got back from Paula Raceway on the 2023 Husqvarna FC 250. I put a good amount of time on this bike today, so obviously a couple weeks ago we got to ride the KTM 250 out at Redbud, so was really eager to get on this bike. Similar changes to both bikes. Obviously they both revamped the frame. The engine compartment is tilted 2 degrees back. Both bikes also got a higher compression ratio, and the only difference between them is obviously the suspension, and that's been a big talk the last 2 years between the KTM and Husky. The KTM comes standard with just the standard height. Husqvarna decided last year, actually 2021, to lower the bikes 10 millimeters. This year, after positive and negative feedback from different media outlets, different testers, they decided to stick with the 10 millimeter lower but change up those settings. So basically the new WP AR front forks, 48 mil, different setting than that, and also an all new shock for this year to go with the new frame. Still 10 millimeters lower in the front, 10 millimeters lower in the back, just all new design. On-track feel to this design, obviously new hydro stop, and they didn't limit the travel. Shock travel still the same, but it is lower, and new dog bone and also new swing arm to get more rigidity through the swing arm and out of the frame. So KTM and Husqvarna on this frame really focused on anti-squat behavior, basically coming into corners, getting the power to the rear wheel and getting more weight to the back. So on-track feel though, I was never a huge fan of this change 10 millimeters lower last year in any of the shootouts with Husqvarna. This year I did see improvement with the updated settings. Still at speed, the bike doesn't feel quite as stable as the KTM, but obviously the new settings that they do have has been a shift in the right direction for what they're doing currently. So definitely if the track is more rutted and slower, the bike really excels well. It does corner very, very well being lower to the ground. Obviously Paula today, we had just ridden it. They overturned it from the National, obviously re-prepped it, but the track did get some pretty good sized ruts and holes, but it's fast. And obviously comparing the Husqvarna to the KTM does feel a little bit more stable at speed because of that lower suspension. So obviously if I had to choose from last year's bike to this year's bike, I would definitely choose this year's bike with the updated suspension settings. I noticed as the track started to deteriorate later in the day, the bike would want to kind of oversteer out of stuff, and that was mostly from the new frame and the way that they have this anti-squat with the 10 millimeter lower suspension, getting the weight more to the back. It's taking weight off the front wheel, so you really have to spend a good amount of time on this Husqvarna with it being lower to get it to not only track but to feel more stable. So it's a little bit more of a game, I feel, setting up the Husqvarna compared to a KTM, and I think to the general consumer, obviously if you guys are going back and forth to decide which one to buy, I would really take that into consideration. Power wise though, the Husqvarna is different mapping than the KTM for 2023. And when we were at Redbud, I was mostly on map 2 on the KTM, and today at Paula it's not quite as deep as Redbud, but I was on map 1 all day, and the bike rips. The bike obviously, like I said, you know, it's not as deep here at Paula and back here in SoCal, but I was on map 1 all day, and Paula right now from the National does have some bigger jumps, and not a problem going right over all that. So as far as power, if you had to compare to KTM or Husky, I think it would be more KTM's favor, but the Husqvarna is not far off with the mapping changes that they brought this year to the table. So obviously they're both still higher compression on both engines. They're lighter, faster, all that stuff for this year. So same thing though, besides the maps, the quick shift, I wasn't a huge fan of it in Redbud, and obviously didn't really like it today at Paula either. And I had talked about at Redbud that maybe it would be better back home if the tracks weren't as deep, but here it just seems like the RPM isn't sufficiently high enough for the quick shift. So again, that's a preference thing, and that's them just bringing something different to the table. So KTM and Husqvarna switching over to the this new frame. Obviously there have been complaints in the past with rigidity, and obviously this new term anti-squat is getting more of the weight off the neck of the frame back to the bike, power to the rear wheel, more traction. And obviously this is kind of a cofactor of, with the suspension being 10 millimeters lower, they're getting the weight to the back. On the Husqvarna, the forks are 10 millimeters lower, so it's almost attributing to getting the weight in the center, which is the Austrian bikes have been known for in the past. Me personally, I was not a huge fan of the frames last year, and I would prefer what they're currently doing with the setup now, getting the weight more to the back, and because you can adjust your suspension to get more weight on the front wheel. That's just my personal opinion, and I feel like the step in the direction that they're going is good for now, and whatever they decide to do, they decide to do. But right now, if I had to choose between the KTM or the Husky, given stock trim, how they sit right now, I would probably favor the KTM only because of the 10 millimeter lower suspension with the changes that they currently have. But either way, I could totally get on a Husqvarna and be stoked all year long. But I think going to buy one knowing that the suspension is lower might favor more to a novice vet-friendly rider. But definitely if you're trying to keep the bike in stock trim and know that you're going to go compete, I would definitely take that into consideration. Either way, both bikes super fast compared to last year's and all that stuff. So either way, though, I look forward to maybe getting on the Husky and the KTM again in the future. Obviously, we only have one day to ride them and really narrow everything down piece by piece. So hopefully we get more time on them and we can bring you guys more content and more info.